My name is Lauren Silver, and I am the Vice President of Education here at the museum, and I'm really excited to see all of you here today. We have a full day's worth of events and activities planned for you. Before we get started on any of that, I want to ask our President and CEO of the museum, John Holler, to welcome you and say a few words. Please welcome John.
Let me tell you what's interesting about being at the Computer History Museum. I think you're going to have a great day, and I was just talking to the rock stars who are here. You're going to do some really mind-blowing stuff that's on the cutting edge of technology. But the interesting thing about running a Computer History Museum is we may be the only history museum in the world that has more future than it does history. And that's really an interesting concept, to think about history in real time. Because the things that you're doing today will be history 10 years from now. Facebook was invented in 2004, so Facebook is only 11 years old. It's already a part of history. Isn't that wild to think about Facebook as already part of history? That's how fast things are changing in technology. And so to be here at this museum, to be at this kind of history museum, is actually to be at a place that is just as meaningful today as it was 15 years ago and as it will be 15 years from now, which we think is really nice. And history helps inform everything that's going on today. So there's kind of a connection with you and the things that we do at the museum. The other thing we really like to think about is innovation, the process of how innovation happens. And the myth of innovation is that it's a guy in a garage or a woman in a lab, and something miraculous happens, and poof, the world changes. Here's this new thing that's going to change the world. Actually, innovation is a lot more about, history shows that innovation is a lot more about what you're going to be doing today, working in groups, trial and error, new ideas, things that work, things that don't work. We do a lot of that here, and we study a lot of that. And so getting you involved in that whole process of innovation, we think is a fun way to introduce you to the way the world really does change through teams and through thinking and through mistakes and then successes. So that's all good. And the third thing I wanted to say to you is your voice matters. In fact, your voice may matter now more than ever before. You have more ways to express yourself. You can do it faster than ever before. You can do it to more people than ever before. And we want to hear from you, and we want to know what's good about this day and the things that you would change at the end of the day if you could change anything. So be thinking about that, because we really do listen to you. This is the 6th year we've been doing Talking to the Future. We've had thousands of high school students come through now as part of this, and we improve it every single time, or we try to, because of what the feedback you give us. So we really want to hear from you today. I'm loving the fact that you're here. You guys are great, a lot of high energy. Welcome to all of you. And now I'm going to turn it back to Lauren, and she's going to get the day started. Glad to have you here, guys. Thanks.
So, without any further delay, I want to introduce the moderator for our panel today, Amy Gardner. Amy used to work here at the museum. She is now Technovation Program Director at a company called Iridescent, and that does education and technology, especially for underserved kids. So we might hear a little bit about that as well today. Amy will introduce each of our rock stars in turn.
So the first person I'd like to welcome is Kim Du. Kim is with Emotive. Give her a big hello. You can have a seat there. You'll learn more about them in a sec. I'm just going to introduce them all. Now we have Jamie Sherman from Intel. And finally, we have Aubrey Schick, who is a contractor on a project at Intel as well. Thank you, guys. All right, so remember how John Holler was saying that you guys are part of this conversation about the future? Well, I was just thinking about how today is tomorrow's yesterday. So if you think of the present as something in the future and the past at the same time, that's kind of what we're going for today. And I bet when you think about wearable technologies, do you guys think about Fitbit? Does anyone here wear a Fitbit or anything like that? Usually it's used in sports, or Google Glass. Have any of you seen Google Glass? No. No, not yet? Well, you might see some fine examples of wearable tech from the past after we're done with this panel. But we're here to talk a little bit deeper about what wearable technology really is. And these people are all experts in wearable technology. So if you have any questions for them after, I want you to write them down or think about them, and definitely be thinking about questions you want to ask them later, because you have the whole day to spend with these women who are all incredible. And this is a really neat opportunity for you to think about whether you might want to work in the field of technology, what that's really like, and we're going to talk about that as well. So why don't we just start briefly, each one of you, starting with Kim, can just say, what your job is and maybe a little bit of background on the kind of problems or issues you guys are working on.
My name's Kim. I work with Emotive. We make wearables for your brain and really create technology that allows you to have a relationship with your brain. Up until now, we've been really looking at brains and studying broken brains, because most people don't have an opportunity to get a brain scan unless they've experienced some kind of trauma. And we think there's an opportunity in being able to understand what a healthy brain looks like over a lifetime, and really conduct research to advance our understanding of the different neurological conditions that happen.
Brains. Jamie.
So I am a research scientist with Intel Experience Group, and my background is actually in cultural anthropology. And so what I do is I do research on people and things, specifically technology things, but also how do people relate to technology? How does technology shape how people relate to each other? And then thinking about what does that mean in terms of where things are going? What are the new kinds of ways that people are interacting that are enabled by technology? Where is that going? What kinds of new things might we want or expect to be able to do? And ultimately, what should my company do about it?
Have all you guys heard about anthropology as a field? Are any of you considering potentially studying that? Pretty cool. What does it all mean? How do we relate to technology? That's a pretty big and awesome question, especially since we're at the Computer History Museum. Mm-hmm. And Aubrey, how about you?
I am currently working as a user experience designer and industrial design, which is kind of product development. So my background is both as a design researcher and kind of product innovations developer, particularly for assistive technologies. So both older adults to help people aging in place, and people with different physical, mental disabilities and whatever. And my work focuses on the social and emotional connection to technology. For example, if we develop a technology to help somebody with a particular disability and it stigmatizes them, everybody sees that they have some sort of device that makes them stand out and, seem different, and they feel uncomfortable about that. So how do you make these assistive technologies cool and interesting and make people, feel proud to make it a part of their identity?
Very cool. Do any of you have family members maybe that use any kind of assistive technology? Do anyone in your family have maybe like a hearing aid or something like that? Things that we might not even consider technology because we've just gotten so used to having these in our lives, like a pacemaker, stuff like that. I want you guys to think about how you think about technology, because your whole idea about what that actually is might change over the course of today. And that's what I find so interesting. Another thing I find really interesting is I've realized a lot about this group today, that they might not have started out studying technology. I began studying German, which led to theater, which led to working at the museum in different ways. Sometimes the path to working in a technology field is not a straight shot. So I'm really curious to hear what you guys have studied and what actually inspired you to enter a technology field. Does anyone want to jump right in there?
Yeah, I'll start. I actually studied art history, philosophy, and then ended up in journalism for about 12 years, working at a newspaper.
And when you're working at Emotive, what is your role there?
I do corporate development, so I handle the business side. I help educate groups about the technology and then work with them to be able to integrate the technology into different research projects or different developments that they're trying to do.
That's neat. So how would a journalism career fit well into becoming someone who works in your role?
It's about communicating with different groups, really listening to people and the problem they're trying to address, and then help them towards different solutions.
And other kinds of backgrounds for you guys?
Yeah, I guess I have a pretty different background. I started out in sculpture and painting, and I figured, well, I can't really influence the world a lot or, maybe make enough money doing that. And so I went to college for industrial design, which is product development, kind of designing what things look like. And while I was going to school, I was in college for design, one of my electives was an engineering prototyping class, and I really loved it. And the thing was, I hadn't planned on going into any sort of engineering in high school, so I actually didn't really do a lot of math and took astronomy classes instead of, actually calculus. And so once I was in college, I decided I'm going to minor in mechanical engineering, after being in the School of Fine Arts. And I enrolled in the, freshman engineering classes, and I wasn't going to pass. I had to drop it. And so I spent a whole semester basically learning calculus and just learning what I didn't learn in high school so that I could move into engineering. And so by the time I left the university, I was working in robotics, and I left out of robotics, but I went from fine arts to the School of Computer Science after getting to school and learned math when I got there.
Jamie, what kind of a background do you have?
So I actually also started pretty distant from technology. I started studying theater directing, and I was going to change the world through art. That was my goal. And then at some point, I went back to school, and I got really interested in anthropology, which is also another way of thinking about how what the world is like, and how things become meaningful. And I started, and then I was going to change the world through anthropology by working with students like you, and in college students, and sort of thinking about how does diversity work? How do people see the world differently, and how do they make sense of the world differently? And then I ended up getting a job in a technology company, helping the company understand how not everybody thinks like an engineer, and what they really needed help with was understanding what people do with technology, and so and what people do with the kinds of things how people work in different, what is life like amongst a different group of people than they're used to seeing.
One thing I'm curious about is if you faced any hurdles when you were in high school or college, when you were thinking about what you wanted to do and how that might have shaped what you're doing now. Anyone have any hurdles that they want to share with these guys?
I guess I can go into mine. I was from a kind of small town high school, and I was the only girl in the whole school who took shop class. And we did this bridge competition. I don't know if any of you have done the Build a Bridge competition, but you see which bridge can hold the most weight. And mine won, one of the all-time records that could hold the most weight. And the boys in the shop class poured glue all over my bridge and broke it. And I had to deal with a lot of, in high school, being interested in technology was like a bit of a problem. But once I got into college, I wound up just hanging out with a lot of the engineering students that really appreciated my kind of creative, social spins on technology. And then it was a lot of fun.
Oh, that was quite formidable. Did any of you have any problems similarly along those lines, or did you have different kinds of things that you were facing when you were studying?
In college, I was just interested in studying and learning as much as I can, and I didn't have a clear idea of who I wanted to be or what I wanted to be after college. I just knew what I wanted to study, and so I think that's okay to be able to just study what you're interested in, and then from that, you'll start to learn who you are and what you want to do.
Yeah, I think I was thinking about this a little bit, and I think that through high school and into college, I was always a little bit different. I just, and I wasn't one of the really popular kids. I wasn't completely isolated, but I was one of those slightly weird kids, and I had other slightly weird friends. But I think, so I always felt a little bit like an outsider, even when I wasn't, and that ended up being a really great. Well, almost all the anthropologists I've ever met are slightly outsiders because it puts you in a place where you can kind of look at things and think about things and try to understand how it worked. I just didn't get how this social thing worked and how you were supposed to be and what it took to be a part of a group. And that ended up being actually really an important I guess I said skill, a position from which to start to think about how things actually do work. So in that way, it took, so what was a real challenge turns out, and I find this a lot, what looks like the hardest part about the thing that you're looking at, whatever it is, sometimes that turns out to be the key. Like when you sort of figure out how to incorporate that or use that turns out to be the key to the whole project, or in this case my life. But but the whole thing begins to fall into place when you figure out how to deal with the thing that looks like a problem and turns out to be the solution.
Did anyone along the way kind of inspire you to seek out a certain career or subject or problem that you were trying to solve? Any inspiration?
There have been so many. Let me think about that. I feel like there's been, for me, I feel like inspiration often comes from problems that where something feels insolvable, and it keeps you up at night, and I can't figure it out, and why isn't it working? or whatever it is, or I don't get it. I don't get it, for me, has always been a kind of a challenge and inspiration, depression, but also elation when you think you have a solution. And just so many people that I've met that have been so generous with their time and treated me like people that didn't, teachers and people I met that didn't talk to me like I was a dumb kid, even when I asked questions that seemed kind of naive, that people that took my questions seriously and gave me real answers. Those people throughout my life in all the different fields that I've been in, and there have been a lot, because I took a pretty circuitous route. Those people have always really encouraged me to keep going and keep asking and keep thinking, and feeling like that it was worth asking the questions, and that it was worth it to keep thinking about.
I'd say as a cultural anthropologist, one of the jobs or things you do is ask questions, right? And is any question too dumb? No. So
it turns out that, again, like I was saying, the problem can also be the solution. So in cultural anthropology, a lot of what we do is try to understand our own assumptions. And that means taking your assumptions and turning them into questions, being deliberately naive. So we have, for example, I studied race and gender. And so at a certain point, I'm like, well, what is race? Right? And we think we know because we practice it every day and we see it every day and we identify people every day and say, oh, you're this, you're that, I'm this, I'm that. And yet, by being deliberately naive and taking a step back and saying, well, what is this thing that I think I know? We actually open ourselves up to other possibilities, other questions. And so not knowing is a method for me. It's a technique. And I don't mean that in an artificial way. I don't pretend not to know what I really know, but rather allowing yourself to not know is actually a really important part, I think, not just of the social sciences, which is anthropology is one, but also of all the sciences and of design. How does this work? How might it work?
Did you guys know that people like anthropologists work at companies like Intel? To me, that was really cool to find that out. Really, it was. Mm-hmm. How about Aubrey and Kim? Did anyone along the way really inspire you?
I would say I was inspired by, I volunteered with a lot of older adults, so people who had trouble maybe lifting things in their house or cleaning their house. And also I volunteered with a group that helped kids with autism. And I saw people with all these different challenges, and I would think, how can I use my ability to make things? At that time, I didn't actually know a lot about technology, but things like, how could you make a better cane or a better pair of glasses or something to help these people live their lives better. And once I learned more about technology, there were more ways that I could help people with different challenges.
I've definitely had different teachers, professors, and even people that I work with that put me out of my comfort zone and expose me to different things that I'm not necessarily either comfortable with or familiar with. So before I joined Emotive, I was very analog. I was very pencil, paper, writing things down. And so joining a technology company, it really forced me to start learning about how I could improve things like taking notes on a computer and having those notes sync to the cloud and suddenly having access to it wherever I go. Being exposed to new technologies that are being developed and just having me look at things in a different light and seeing that there's multiple solutions to one problem.
One thing that we were talking about earlier was how technology is sort of like a dance partner. I think it's interesting to think about technology and how it tells us a little bit about us as humans. Does anyone have any comment to that about how we interact with technology as a partner?
I'm probably going to get the quote a little off, but Genevieve Bell at Intel, I saw her give a talk, and she said cultures define themselves by what they make, And that's really interesting. I mean, because whether it's every culture has their own clothes or their own artifacts that are a part of who they are, and I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, as I had been working at the museum for about 6 years, and I was not I wouldn't say that I came as a technology enthusiast, and I was always thinking, why do we have to do that? Why is this so big a part of our lives? And then I began thinking about technology as humans as well, and how we actually interact with technology. I mean, even if you look back to the 1960s, maybe some of you guys saw some of the artifacts downstairs, like the robots. And certain, things we're talking about today, like, are the robots against us? Do we work together? People were asking those questions then, or should we be working with technology as something that's kind of alongside of us to enhance us?
It was very interesting, actually. Last night I was talking about this, and so our relationships to things are related to our relationships to ourselves. So how we think about what a person is. In America, we tend to talk a lot about individuals and being yourself, and it's important to be who you are, which is all great. But in other cultures, it's not. That's not always the most important thing. In some cultures, it's more important to be, to fulfill the duties of the position that you're in, of the son or the daughter or of the friend. So there's a different kind of emphasis on what's important, and a different kind of idea about body and self. Is your soul and your body the same thing? And actually, it turns out that this is relevant to how we think about things. So does a technology have an essence that is or does a thing have an essence that is a personality, or is it is an object? In America we tend to think of objects as just objects, right? But in other places we might think of them differently and invest them with a certain kind of soul or essence or and then that changes how we might relate to it, because if inanimate objects have presence and being, then we might think of them differently, like what is the earth? How do we respond to? How do we think about those things? And so it really turns out that our cultures shape how we interact with things, how we think of what they are, what they mean to us. Are they a part of our family?
Yeah,
right?
I mean, I'm asking Siri probably 100 questions a day. Like, she's a friend that I know, and she's also my resource. Where am I going? Who is this? What does this mean? She's, artificial intelligence is turning into something that not only helps us, but also allows us to kind of shape our environment and what we're learning and how we look at things.
How many people get reminders from technology? Do any of you get reminders, right? So does it kind of nag you like your mom? It's like, it's time to go to class, right? So technology is starting to help us by reminding us, but also to nag us a little bit by telling us things that we might not really want to know.
Can you guys imagine what it would have been like this morning if something didn't help wake you up, or if you couldn't have checked your email, or if you couldn't have, what would your life be like without this? Would you panic? Would you be excited and happy? Maybe. I'm also thinking about how, because a lot of us have art backgrounds or theater backgrounds, if any piece of literature or a movie or anything really inspired you. We have some pieces of fiction downstairs in the exhibit, and that's kind of neat too, about a bug that's going to come and get everyone, or, take the technology down. Anything come to mind that you guys love?
Well, as prompted by you, I actually just very recently read The Diamond Age by Neil Stephenson, which is also known as a young lady's primer, and it was written in 1995. And it's all about nanotechnology and how 3D printing really changes society. And it's, for something that was written in 95, I think it's more current now than it's ever been. Augmented reality goggles and things like that. These are all things that were, discussed by people a long time ago. And I encourage reading that book, even though it seems old.
I actually don't think it seems old. I think it almost seems so many things that were in that. So I also have read this book, so I would recommend it. And I read it at the recommendation of a friend of mine and a colleague of mine at Intel. But it really, it raises a lot of questions about, are these, about, it tells a story, and so it's a really awesome story, and you can just read it because it's an awesome story, but it also raises lots of questions about, is this a good thing? Is this a bad thing? How do people form groups using technology? How does our use of technology unite certain kinds of people and not others?
I want to bring up a very specific thing. So some of you may have heard of the idea of kind of cyberpunk, where you're embedding technology in your body. Maybe you're putting stuff in your head or whatever. You're putting this technology in your body to enhance, to give you superpowers or whatever. The thing is, think of how quickly your cell phone becomes obsolete. You better believe, like, in 2 years at the most, you want a different cell phone. So why would you put something in your body that you may have to take out again, or like, what if it gets a bug or whatever? And so in this book, you've got a group of people who are, embedding stuff. And then you have another group of people that identify as neo-Victorians, right? And they don't inject these little mites to twitch their muscles to make them strong without going to the gym. They actually work out with exercise machines. They choose to do that. They choose to carry versus embed technology. And like, what does that mean for the future?
I heard of a company that you can get a chip installed in your finger so that you can either get into the building or get access to top secret files and stuff like that. And I'm just wondering, do any of you have pets that have chips in them? I'm guessing some of you might. That's something that we don't really think twice about, right? But what about if you had a chip in your finger? How would you guys feel about that? Who here would dig that? Would anyone like to have embedded technology in them? I see maybe a couple hands, a few brave people. How about the others? Would you rather have technology on the outside of your body that you interact with? Who here would not want anything like that? I think it's so interesting because we're very divided, and that means we're all thinking about this differently. And what I find really exciting about today is you guys are going to be able to actually, in some cases, put on a piece of technology from Emotive, for example. Or you might see a prototype of a very rare object that Aubrey brought. Or you might see something that Jamie brought or some research she's been doing to think about all of this. I'm wondering if you guys can talk a little bit about the things you brought today, because right after the panel, you guys are going to be able to look and talk and think about all of this with these 3 people. So if you could just say a little bit about what you brought, that would be great.
Yeah. I brought 2 wearables for your brain. It's the Emotive Epoch and the Emotive Insight. And this technology allows you to control physical and virtual objects with your mind, but also allow you to be able to understand how your brain is developing and how you can access that technology to be able to optimize your cognitive performance.
That sounds pretty cool. So anyone who's sitting at the blue tables will later also work with Kim, and we'll talk about what's going to happen after that as well, too. But I just wanted to point out to all you guys that she brought some pretty far out stuff. You guys are going to have your minds blown. Have you ever thought about how your brain functions? What I think about is really cool about Emotive is we know all about when our brain is not working right. And a lot of people might end up having Alzheimer's. They might have cognitive disabilities. But what happens when you study a healthy brain? You know, that's an interesting question. When things go wrong, we try to fix them, don't we? But there's a lot of value in understanding when things go right. And that's, I think, a little bit of what's going on with Emotive technology.
Absolutely. To really understand how different neurological conditions develop, you have to know what the current brain state was before it started developing. You think about it, 1 in 3 people have some kind of neurological condition, whether it be not being able to sleep, having chronic headaches, all the way down to cerebral palsy, dementia, epilepsy. And so being able to understand what a healthy brain looks like over a lifetime will allow us to be able to understand how to maybe offset and delay these different conditions.
And can you just go a little bit into moving objects with your mind? Because this totally sparked my interest.
Yeah, so later on we'll be able to allow some of you to be able to control a virtual object. So the software is a machine learning algorithm, but you'll be able to think, move the box, or grow the plant. And the software will recognize your mental command, your brain pattern, to be able to control that, and the box will move based on you thinking about it moving.
Who here wants to move a virtual object with your mind? Who does not? I can't believe you don't. Okay, Jamie, tell us what you have in store.
So when I started looking at wearable technologies about 3 years ago, when people would talk about technology in general, they would say, well, technology is getting to be more and more like an extension of you. And so I did what I was talking about before. I asked a very naive question. I said, well, what does that mean? What feels like an extension of you? And I started doing research, and at first I started looking at people who had prosthetic limbs, so like legs or arms or something, and asking what is it like to have a prosthetic? So it would, that's kind of like a replacement for a personal part. Does that feel like you? Does it not feel like you? And then I started looking at some other things, sort of like I was looking at snowboarding, I was looking at running, I was looking at a bunch of different things that people were doing, and I was thinking about what kinds of objects in the world that we already know when do you feel like something is an extension of you? Sort of a part of you, but an extension's not quite a part of you, it's sort of a part of you and not a part of you at the same time, right? Because it's an extension. So then I started thinking about what are those qualities and trying to think about how, and that's one possible relationship. We talked about a partner, and we talked about it could be a frenemy, it could be an enemy, right? So what are the possible relationships? And if we're thinking about this relationship, an extension of you, are there qualities of a thing that would help us then very carefully, if we wanted to design something that had a particular relationship, how would we do that? What would be the things that object should have to make it easier to feel like an extension of you?
Very cool. So anyone who's in the orange zone over there, you're going to do some pretty cool stuff after lunch with Jamie. And you guys can all walk around during the next part of the show. But Aubrey, what did you bring with you?
I brought a wearable sound experience called Vibatire. And what it is it's a vest that you can plug your iPod or your phone or your movies into it, and it breaks that sound down into 32 different channels, and they're little motors that are in an array across your body. So it was originally designed so that deaf people would have a richer sense of music, so they could tell the difference between songs. And so any of you that happen to have brought your phone with music or an iPod with music. I also have Pandora over there. You can actually see and feel what that music is like in the vest. And it also has, for display purposes, there are lights on the other side so you can watch the sound move over the body too.
I want to wear it.
Yeah, me too.
I think I have to try that too. This is so neat. I can't wait to see all of this in action. Can you also describe a little bit about what you're going to be doing after we have lunch? Because a lot of these ladies have talked about prototypes, and we have some examples of some very valuable prototypes here. But what you're going to be exploring with your groups, according to color, after lunch.
Yeah, so one of the things that we do is we support a developer community, and what we enable them is to access a software development kit to be able to create different applications using our technology and really innovating further than what we've done by giving people different use cases to be able to use the brain technology. And so we're going to have groups broken out to create companies, and their companies will come up with applications on how they would use the technology, whether they become a company that does a video game using mind control, or a company that does moving different objects, or smart home integration to turn lights on and off using your mind. So I'm excited to see what you come up with.
I should also mention here that I'm sure these guys are really interested to hear what you guys have to say, because you guys have ideas that might actually be really valuable to everybody here. So I want you all to feel totally free to give them your thoughts and to not be, intimidated to say what you think or questions you have, because all of this information is very valuable to these guys. And Jamie.
So a lot of what I do is actually trying to understand people who are not me, right? And we try to, how do you design something for somebody whose life might be different from mine, or what's important to them is different from what's important to me. And so what we're going to do in our group is we're going to divide into groups, and then each group will interview another group, and your job is going to be to really understand your users. What are your users like? What is their life like? What's important to them? What problems might they face? Or I shouldn't say what challenges might they face? And then we're going to come up with a prototype and design something that's designed not for you, but for them. And then I hope, and I think we'll have time, you'll design a prototype, and then it's really important to get feedback to find out if you got it right, because oftentimes, we don't know all the details, and it's even a good way of finding out more, is saying, here's this thing that I thought would be suitable for you, and that person can say, well, yeah, that works for me, but that totally doesn't work for me, because, man, I'm always holding a kid, so how can I don't have two hands, so I got to have only one hand. And so you find out things by showing them an object, you find out new things about what needs to change about the technology you're designing. So we're going to go through a process of user research, design, and then user feedback about the thing that you designed.
Team Orange, if you are sitting with any of your classmates, do you think you know who they are? I think you're going to learn things that you didn't actually know. And this is a really cool part of the design process, because even if you have a great idea, if you don't test it, if you're not empathetic with your users, then you could have spent all this time making something and it might not even be totally usable for the person who's going to use it. So this is a really important part of the design process too. And Aubrey, what do you have for us?
So the green group is the group that's with me, and we're going to be developing looks like wearable prototypes. And so what we're going to be doing is thinking about how can we solve a problem with a wearable technology? So whether, it's some kind of, an evolution of the pager, so a doctor can get information about, oh, he's needed in surgery, or he got a message from a patient, or whether it's, for example, a rescue worker, a firefighter to get information, or maybe you're collecting information about yourself. And so what we're going to be doing is thinking about different embodiments for wearable devices. I see people wearing ties. I didn't even think about this. So maybe, your tie has like a camera or a display, or your wristband or a hat or whatever, and to think about how we can get information to enhance our lives by wearing these things. And we're actually going to put together some very simple electronics and talk about how this information would be presented.
Very cool. I'm thinking about a William Gibson novel around now. Wearable technology like a scrolling marquee and a tie or belt, or all these really cool applications for that stuff. So you guys have a lot of really fun things in store for you, and I hope you're really excited. So Lauren, did you want to come up and introduce the next part of the day? Cool. Thank you guys so much. Can you give them a big round of applause?